All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Thursday, October 20th of 2022. Got a two-game NBA slate and a NFL showdown. So a little bit of a couple sports going on tonight. Hope you're getting in on the action. For those of you who are new here, this is a show where we go over questions that come in our Discord about how to use the SaberSim app, DFS tips and strategy, any and all questions. If you have questions ahead of time, you should get those in the office hours channel in our Discord. If you're not part of our Discord, there's a link in the description below. And if you are just finding this stream for the first time, welcome. You can put questions in the live YouTube chat and we will get to those as well. And with that being said, we're just going to kick it right off with a question here from In It to Bink It. And In It to Bink It is asking about golf. And the question is, if I remove ownership fade on golf, what will SaberScore measure in my lineups? Okay, this is a really good question. So, first thing I want to do is we're going to come over here to golf and we're going to build some lineups, let's say for, the round 2 PGA. So let's just get a couple lineups going here. We're going to talk about SaberScore and we're going to talk about what it is looking at for golf specifically, because I think this is like a really good question. And reading the question one more time, it says, if I remove ownership fade from golf. So, I think this is like a good question for like NFL Showdown 2, because some of the metrics are like the same in this instance. So what In It to Bink It is asking is like, if you come over here and you look at SaberScore and then you hover, it says SaberScore is our way of quantifying the impact of upside, correlation, and ownership on the strength of a lineup. The higher the SaberScore, the higher the upside potential for DFS tournaments. That is like the simplest and easiest definition of SaberScore if you aren't familiar with it already. So, what In It to Bink It is asking is like, okay, if I come in here and I look at the sliders, if I remove ownership fade, what is it looking at? And the answer to the question is that, if you come back here to the definition, you remove correlation, you remove ownership, it's basically quantifying the impact of the upside of the strength of the lineup. So all you do is you just remove those metrics from SaberScore, and whatever's left is what is being looked at. So that would be the impact of the upside, because just, brief overview. Interesting. I don't see ranges of outcomes here. All right. I'll find out why the ranges aren't showing up there. Maybe they were only showing up for the main tournament. Okay, here they are. Not sure what the lag is there, but you can see like the range of outcomes for any golfer if you click on their name, and those ranges of outcomes come directly from the sim data. So we are randomly sampling the sims when we build your lineups. The lineups are not being built on average projection. So I think it's important to understand that, when you're running lineups, that the sims are randomly being sampled. And in some sims, golfers score more. Some sims, golfers score less. So, SaberSim still has to take into account their range of outcomes and then grade the strength of that for, the tournaments that you're playing. So think about it like that. Let me know if you have any follow-up In It to Bink It. All right, moving on to our next question here. We were having some fun in the office hours channel prior to this. We didn't have too many questions. I posted a joke and I got some joke responses in regards to that. So I'm just going to address them really quickly. So Aaron said, why are my lineups not winning the Millie Maker? The answer is, you're not playing the Millie Maker. Like, what are you doing? Get in there. So just kidding. Only play it if it's within your bankroll. But moving on to the next question, my man Jordan Chan helping me out, getting me some good questions to talk about on the stream. Thank you, Jordan. And this one says, hey, Andrew, with a big NBA slate yesterday and another one coming up tomorrow, I would love to hear about how you're handling late swap this season as news breaks throughout the slate. Are you late swapping before the start of every game. How are you deciding when to late swap? If not, are you changing anything with your settings and exposures as you late swap throughout the slate? Okay, great question, Jordan. Appreciate it, my man. So, we're going to go back to NBA. And, last night was like the first big slate, and, kind of had to like get back in like the late swap groove and just kind of like remember like what we're really looking for throughout the night with late swap. So, I know we've talked about it a couple times, but the Basketball Monster news dashboard is like an awesome resource to see injuries and like any and all changes to NBA lineups. They do a really good job of summarizing that. I heavily recommend, checking that out throughout the night periodically, seeing how, if there's any news that is worthy of being watched or has broke that you need to take into account. And the Sims are taking that news into account, but it just kind of gives you like an insight into like why things are changing. So I think that's like a really good resource. I'll say something that I did is, listening to Max and Jordan on their stream yesterday. If you didn't catch it, it was a great listen. It's up on all of our podcast platforms and YouTube. Check it out. But, Max said like, oh, something a lot of people do is set a rule that you don't want more than 3 players on one team. So you say like, no more than 3 on any team. And you would just, save that, and it'll make sure that no more than 3 is used. I had a couple other rules in there that I don't have showing right now. But I'll say that, as the night went on and as like the amount of games remaining got smaller. So I think, if we go back to yesterday, let's hover back really quickly. And it was a 12 game slate, and you had like 2 games at the 7 p.m. Eastern window, followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, and then 2 at 8 Eastern, 1 at 9 Eastern, and then 2 at 10 Eastern. So what I'll say is like, I think it's a good idea. Well, this is something I did. So, I'm interested to hear like what other people do, or if anyone has any pushback, but I loosened like my restrictions or the things that I had set as the night went on. So I think I had like 3 rules total. I turned them off after this 4:30 window, my time on the West Coast. So, once like 7 out of the 12 games had gone, I turned off like my stacking rule, and mostly because at that point, over half the games have already started. I'm really just trying to swap to like the best plays as far as like late breaking news. I'm not so much caring about whether or not like they're on the same team. I think like once you get over halfway through like a slate of like players being locked, you're less likely to get those like mega game stacks anyways, unless it's like Portland from last year where just like a bunch of really low salary players were playing. I think those are like specific instances with like that we saw with Portland and with OKC last year. And, those are like slate context things that you have to know like ahead of time to account for. But I think it's like totally okay to loosen your restrictions as you late swap throughout the night. That way you don't limit yourself from getting those huge value plays that do open up in the later windows. I don't want to get less of somebody because I have a rule restricting them from coming in my lineup when they're just in a smash spot because somebody gets ruled out in the late game and not enough people are going to take advantage of it. So just loosening those restrictions, allowing the builder to do what it does best and get you those high upside plays that are going to be lower owned and just have a great value. I think that's like something that you should highly consider working into your process. I'm not going to say like I'm going to do it the same exact way every time. I'm going to try and refine it and see if I can continue to fine tune it. I encourage you to do the same, but I think that's something that's definitely worth noting throughout the night. I will say, another thing I did was that I was doing poorly on DraftKings and good on FanDuel. So on FanDuel, what I did was for like my late swap, what I did was I was like playing the large field stuff. So if this was FanDuel, I actually came in here and for the for like the six this Denver game, I lowered my sliders like one tick each, and I was still doing good on FanDuel by the time these last two games started. So I lowered my sliders like a tick further, just because that, you know, it just goes back to like what we are just talking about. Like you, as the night goes on, you just want to get like the best plays that open up from a value perspective. So I don't want to worry as much about ownership fade because I don't want to get off of some of those huge values. I want to get as much of them as I can. I am not as worried about correlation as well, especially when like my lineups are already doing good. I think it's good to like it's a definitely a strategy to lower your slider settings. And another thing I did on DraftKings where I was doing poorly is that I ended up bumping up my sliders like a tick. So I think it's like, you know, I'm not saying this is like a solved strategy or like something like for sure that is proven to work. I don't think it's that at all. But you know, just like theoretically, if I'm doing poorly, I probably want to get away from the field a little more, be a little more diverse, and try and get to some of those players and those points that people aren't getting to as much. And then when I'm doing well, I don't need to get as different, and I can pack in some of those more projected points and try and maintain my positions in my standings. So I think like that's something to look at, you know, keep an eye on the contests, see where you're at, see how you're doing, and then you can make any slider adjustments that you see fit based on how you're doing. If you're not sure, leave them alone and then just keep rolling. I'll say that, you know, as far as the part of the question that says, you know, let's see, handle late breaking news. Okay, we talked about that. How are you deciding when to swap if not? I think that's a good question. And that's something that I haven't figured out for myself. I think that, you know, late swapping throughout the night can be like really tedious. To be honest, the honest answer is that I partially I love it. And I just can't get enough of the new sims that run. I just want to take advantage of like every sim edge I can. And I, you know, stay like up to date. And I'm always kind of watching, like I pretty much move in 30-minute increments. You know, it's like 5:20 my time. And I'm like, okay, you know, can't go anywhere for the next 10 minutes. And then you know, 5:30 hits, it's like 5:31. All right, you know, we got like 20 minutes to go do this or that. I know that can be like really tedious for a lot of people, but like that's kind of part of the NBA grind, and that's like something that I enjoy about it. So me, I'm late swapping at every lock, and what I'm doing is managing my exposures in app to make sure I'm just getting to some of the guys like I know I want that haven't really been affected by any sims. So I think like that's something that's definitely worth talking about. So you know, if Jokic starts at 6, you know, one of the later games, and pre-lock you're getting like, I don't know, 60% of him maybe, and then you run a late swap and it drops to like 15%, and it's like, hold on, you know, go and check your news dashboards and see if anything changed that really like warrants that. Did like a huge value at the center position open up, or like why, or you know, like what would cause that? Try and connect the dots yourself. And then if that's like you can't figure it out, you know, don't take that late swap. Come in here, set a min ownership that like you're comfortable with, and then rerun a late swap. So I think like it's pretty important to give the builder some guardrails as far as your exposures that you really care about before late swapping. I know that was one of the questions, you know, are you changing anything with your settings and exposures as you late swap throughout the slate? So I will say like, you know, you got to give the builder some guardrails to get what you're looking for, because if you don't, it's not going to know. And especially if you're using late swap consistently, it's even more important to tell the builder those things. I would advise you not to be too opinionated. Really just pick like the couple of players or couple of spots that you think make like the highest value impact, and the builder is really good, it's going to do the best things around that. So that's what I would think about when late swapping. So I'm open to hearing how other people use late swap. I'm always trying to learn myself, but as far as like right now, this point in the season, that's how I'm thinking about it. That's how I'm using it. So great question there, Jordan. Okay, I think we have a couple follow ups here to this NBA conversation. I'm going to get back to some of these questions in the Discord. The next one is from Terrell, so and Tim. I'll get back to both of you guys on that for sure. But going to hit this question here from Topper. Are there any good rules to put into place for NBA DFS? Okay, Topper. So what I'll say is that, as of like yesterday, I didn't have that many good ones, like, or ones that I would suggest. But listening to Jordan and Max chat yesterday and hearing Max talk with his many years experience playing DFS, he dropped some nuggets, I'll say, in the stream, and that's kind of what he comes on for. So we have this stream yesterday, how to beat daily fantasy basketball like an NBA DFS pro. It was an almost 2-hour stream. I mean, the questions just kept rolling in. Ton of good information in this. I would say, I'd highly recommend watching this video. Already has a lot of views. They just went back and forth. Max talked about a lot of good, like, kind of baseline, kind of guardrail rules that will not be too specific and that you can probably take to most slates with you. So I would check that out. One of them that I talked about was using no more than 3 players from a team, mostly on like large slates. And that goes back, like, the only nuance there is like where there's a team like we just talked about with Portland and OKC last year, but that was like later in the season, where so many of their players are low salary players playing a lot of their games like for the first time, and there's just like a huge edge by playing a lot of them. So there's like a case to be made where it's okay to play more than 3 players from a team at times. I think it's very like slate specific, but as like a general rule, that seems like a fair guardrail rule to start with. So I would listen to the stream, take from it what you will. I that's one thing that I took from it. So I think that's like a rule that's like pretty safe to use out of the gate. Okay, question from Uncrabby Cabby. Hey Andrew, how are you determining if a player is under or over owned or efficiently owned versus the field? Okay, so Uncrabby Cabby, very good question. What I like to do is something that I talked about the other day, like when I walked through my NBA process. I know you're around in these streams a lot, so if you missed it, I'm gonna answer your question. But we did like a really kind of in-depth segment on this. I basically walked through like 90% of my NBA process. So if you come over here walking through an NBA process, for anyone who's like doesn't want to watch a whole video, these are all time stamped. You can go into the description and click on the section where it says like walking through NBA process, and only start and watch those segments. I think there was 2 of them. But getting back to your question, I would say like run a test build and see how the entire pool ownerships are coming in compared to the ownership shown in the app. So like, let's say for tonight, we'll just do like a quick one. And what I'll do is I'll come in here, I'll make 2 quick adjustments, just really, really small impact adjustments. That way I can see the lineups, and I'll come in here and I'll build 1,500 lineups. I'll open my number of lineups up to the entire pool here, run a build. And what I want to do is sort basically by leverage or ownership. So let's let this build, let this finish, and players are going to load. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure, I'm just going to remove some columns. That way I can see this pool owners, pool exposure. So the 2 things that I'll usually do is 1, check sort by ownership, because I want to see if like the highest owned players are worth basically what their ownership is. Like, are they paying it off in a 1,500 lineup pool sample? And, for players like Maxi and Patrick Beverly, according to this randomly sampled group of Sims, they are worth like this ownership. Tobias Harris is like coming in a little under his ownership. That's like something I would note. So one, I like to check like the highest owned players. And then two, I like to just sort by leverage and see who is coming up here. So really interesting that like we're getting so much Matt Ryan. I don't know how like legitimate that is. I know it's a 2-game slate, so it could be because we have a 6 ownership fade, and right now he's projected for no ownership because I lowered my projected points. So on like a 2-game slate, I'll allow more players into my player pool. I know on the stream with Max and Jordan, what Max talked about was that he likes to increase his min projection to 18 on like large slates. I think that's like totally worth doing just because there's more players available. And then, inversely on a 2-game slate, you might want to lower it to allow for some of these lower owned players to get into your lineup. I'd be like a little careful with someone like Matt Ryan, just lowly projected. This is probably like way too much exposure for me. I would probably crank this down like maybe half of this or maybe more. I'm not sure if I were like building lineups, but just like as like a test build, okay, I'm going to like kind of note these guys and see like who's coming up. And then conversely, I'm going to inversely sort by leverage, see like who is a really bad play according to this test build that we're running. And so, I'll kind of note these guys. So like, this is kind of how I'm telling or what I'm doing to analyze if players are going to be like over owned or under owned. And then I'm like weighing that intuitively to see, do I like agree with this? Am I okay with this? Do I want to accept this much plus or minus leverage? So those are things that I like to think about. Highly recommend the segment from the other day. Really, really in-depth like walkthrough prior to NBA kicking off. But just some things I'm thinking about there. John made a question. Those COVID games like that were wild. Yeah, they were really crazy. Opened up huge values on the slate. I don't even want to say slate specific, but maybe just like time of the world specific. I don't think we're really ever going to see games like that. Hopefully we don't. So crazy times, 100%. All right. Question here from Manny. Hi, Andrew. For NBA, what do you think is a good filter to use for a small slate like tonight's or a huge one like the one tomorrow? Okay. So, Manny, feel like we just talked about it, but happy to go over it one more time. So, I would listen to I like to listen to people that I consider like better than me. So like, when Max says, for the most part, our in-app filter is good. Like our in-app filter is set to, I believe it's set to 15 by default or 13. This one I adjusted. So on the 2-gamer the other day, what I did was I just came in here, I sorted by projection, and I kind of just scrolled down. And what I just did was like, I basically scrolled down to the point where I felt like if I got this bottom player in my lineup, am I okay with them? And I don't remember exactly how I came to that decision 2 nights ago, but what I settled on was a 7-point projection. It's a little low, but I was going for like a more risky, more ownership approach and trying to get like one or somebody like really low who can make my lineup unique. Do I recommend that to everybody? No. I would say it's definitely okay to open up your filter like lower and include some more of these players, especially if you think like they have the upside to get there. I know that's like a little like subjective, but that's the way I go about it. And then on like a large slate, I believe if I'm correct, this is either 13 or 15, but I know Max said, he likes to increase it even to like 18. He thinks that, he doesn't need some of those players in that like 13 to 17 range, and that he can get enough good lineups using a min projection filter of 18. So, a couple recommendations for you there. I would say, come in here and play with the filter, and like look at the lineups that come up when you lower it. So, if you want to like lower it to 7, run some lineups, see what they're looking like. Just start, scrolling through these lineups and say, am I comfortable that when I open my app, I'm going to see a lineup with Javon Carter or Matt Ryan or both in this instance. And like, if the answer is no, then raise your min projection filter. If the answer is yes, then, leave it and move on to the next step of your process. So I think it's like totally fair to leave it where it's set to. I think it's also okay to raise it or decrease it based on like the size of the slate. So a couple recommendations for you there. Let me know if you have any more questions. Gonna jump back to Discord and hit this question that we stopped at. So this one came from Terrell, and it says, can you explain the easiest way to maintain your exposures you have set while late swapping and still getting those exposures you preset? Yes, totally can do that. So let's go back because I don't have any entries for this. So I would say we're just going to pull up yesterday's slate and talk a little bit about that. So what I would suggest is that you always come in here before you're going to late swap, look at whatever games are remaining, or actually even before that, let's say like you're building pre-lock, right? And we're just going to stick with Jokic. Like just say like, you really like him and you're getting as much of him as you want, even though you're already getting like 50% of him, we'll say, for the sake of the thing. You're like, cool, I don't have to do anything. Like still set this to whatever number you want and do it for as many players as you need to. And I would say, be a little flexible with the numbers, because as the number of players in the player pool decreases, it's going to be harder for the builder to always meet these exposures. So if you're late swapping and running into issues, I would accept being comfortable moving these min exposures plus or minus like 10%. Like if you run a build and you set this to 40 and the builder's like, hey, I can only find 30% of lineups that have Jokic that meet the salary and positional restrictions at this point in the slate. I think you got to be like okay with that. At least you told the builder like what you wanted and it tried to give it to you and it said, hey, due to the context of the slate at this point, the builder can only get in 30%. I think it's like, I wouldn't get tied to that number. I would just say, okay, I told the builder it gave me as much Jokic as it could, barring like the other restrictions. And you should know that like, instead of forcing him in and then forcing in like more Matt Ryans and more Javon Carters, it's giving you good lineups with him. And then the lineups where like the builder didn't think it would be a good lineup with him, you're not getting those lineups. Instead, you're getting a higher EV lineup that doesn't have him. So I think like you got to be a little accepting and be a little flexible with late swap, but this is how I would handle it myself. And, if you have like any rule set, like we kind of talked about earlier, if you're having trouble late swapping later in the slate, I would start to disable your rules. Like if you have a lot of rules for like, don't use 2 players above 8,000 in the same lineup if they're on the same team, or some of those like other like kind of specific rules. It's the if you run into issues, just start decreasing stuff little by little. Be more open to your exposures being flexible, and that should lead to less headache. And you should know that the lineups that the builder's giving you, it's giving you for a reason, because those are the highest EV lineups at this point in the slate. So think about it like that. I'm going to hit this next question from Tim. I actually think this is the same exact question. So Tim said, to add to Jordan's question, can you go over how to control exposures in the late swap build? Thanks. Okay, Tim, I didn't realize that your and Terrell's question was a 2-for-1, but if either of you have any follow-up, just let me know. And I'm going to move on to this question from John. I'm going to hit this comment here from Ryan. The first slate where NHL and NBA lock at the same time will be fun. Ryan, if you're playing both, good luck to you, my friend. Much bolder than I am. I am only playing NFL Showdown tonight. So good luck, and try and do your best to manage news the best you can. But all right, moving on to this question from John. And the question says, more specific question here, so I included a screenshot. I used this last week to overstack one of the more popular games of the week. I tried to use a stack rule at first, but realized doing it that way put this game stack in every lineup. I also wanted to do the other end of the spectrum and only play players from this game only as one-offs. Would I just make another rule that has, if no QB, then say max one secondary, or is there a better way to do this? And then the question, next part of the question says, is there a way to generalize this to only specific teams instead, or do I have to go game by game like I did? Okay, so I'm going to explain the rule in the screenshot. So the rule says, if at least one primary player is used, then use at least 4 secondary players. And it says Kyler Murray or Geno Smith as the primary, and then it says secondary players, and then he is adding the position players that he deems like appropriate to play for that game. So John is basically trying to say, like, if I use Kyler Murray or Geno Smith, then I basically want a game stack of that game. And he did it by using a manual group rule where he just like click them in. So what he's saying, is like, do I have to do that for every team if that's the way, if that's like the rule I want to build? So John, the answer to your question is that you can do this with an automatic group rule that will save you a ton of time. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that right now. So what I would do is I would come in, let's say for the sake of the example, we're going to pick the highest total team or the highest total game that pops off to me. So that'd be this game right here, the Seattle Charger game. Looks like the total is over 50 here. So what you would do is you would come in here, you would set a group automatic rule, and then you would do an if then. So then what you're saying is that what I would do is I would change this to game because we're talking about game stacking. So if at least one, and I would uncheck all positions except quarterback. So if at least one quarterback is used from this game, then, oh man, can I do this? Okay, I wonder if I can pick a team here. No. Okay, that's not going to work. Maybe it's a stacking rule then we have to build. Oh, you're saying that if you use it as a stacking rule, then it does it to every team. Wow, this is an interesting problem, John. You know what I might have to do is I might have to take this one offline and get back to you tomorrow, because I see like the problem that you're having. It's like, man, it's just, I don't think you can say you could game stack. Or if I say, like, if at least one quarterback from this game, then use at least blank secondary players. Because I could say I could create a stack rule from this, but I can't, it would only be for the team, I think. Okay, so if at least one quarterback from this game, then use at least blank secondary players. John, what I would try is I would try it this way. I would say do a group automatic rule and group it by game, go position quarterback, then use at least, we'll say 4 secondary players, and then we'll say from the same game, and then we'll only allow position players. And then, like I see the players you took, they were like kind of like the better projected plays. So I would increase, I would add a stat requirement and put my projection greater than, we'll say like 10, just for the sake of this. And then we're going to just kind of see what comes up here. So I think we could do it this way. This is like the workaround for now. Run it this way, save it. you're going to have 11 rules. Man. No, but then you can't choose the game. Okay. So John, I'm going to take this one offline and see if I can troubleshoot this off stream. It's a really interesting problem to solve. I wish that, I could only apply it to certain teams here. If I can't figure it out, I'll put that in as a feature request for the future and use this as an example. So let me take this one offline, see if I can come up with a solution for you. But in the meantime, you might have to do it the way you're doing by choosing the players or the games and then doing those teams manually. So appreciate the question, making me think a little bit on stream here. Happy to try and solve these problems with you guys as, the more complex problems come about, and, take those problems back to the team if we can't solve them, and see how we can work them into the app to help you guys in the future. But that being said, gonna move on here to this next question from Couch in Discord. And John said, yeah, no worries. It was an interesting predicament I encountered. Very interesting, and interesting problem to try and solve. So this question from Couch says, is there a workaround for DraftKings builds to view lineups by percentiles? If you don't edit the projections, you can't see the lineups. But if you edit the projections, you can't use percentile view. Okay, so let's try this out. So I'm going to X these changes so we could do it the way Couch is saying. So if I run builds just like this, it says if you don't edit the projections, you can't see the lineups. But if you edit the projections, you can't use percentile view. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by percentile view, but let's check. So Couch, if you are here, and if you could tell me what you mean by percentile view, I would really appreciate that. Because, what I'm thinking is like maybe you're saying you're like adding in the percentiles as columns here, but any follow-up is appreciated. So like if you guys didn't know, all of the columns that are in the home screen are available in this post build screen. We just default to so many, and then you can add them, and then you can see like all the percentiles, etc. So not sure what Couch is talking about, but if I were to like make some changes so we could see the lineups. Okay, boom, we have this here. And, these are the lineup sorting methods for the moment. If your question is related to like lineup percentile sorting, that's something that the team is still working on finalizing behind the scenes. So I'm not sure exactly what you are referring to here, but you're sending in like messages here, and I'm not able to kind of figure it out. So, okay, you're saying if I go here, and then I can click. Interesting. Okay. So what I did was, okay, so apparently if you use this percentile, what you can do is you can change everybody's percentile to the 95th percentile projection that is shown. I'm assuming this is going to match. So if I look at CD Lamb, yep, 37.4, projection 37.4. So it converted all of their projections to their 95th percentile, and then is now treating that as their projection and sorting by SaberScore. Really interesting. So then what you're saying is that if I undo this and go back to average, and then if I am in this screen, it will not show that. And then once I adjust projections, that it gets grayed out. Okay, really interesting, Couch. I actually wasn't aware of this. It sounds like a bug that like when you edit it, it shouldn't go away. Maybe I can look into like why this is happening. So let me take this one back to the team as well. I'll follow up on this question as well as the rule question from John and address those at the beginning of tomorrow's stream, and we will go from there. So appreciate like the hard hitting questions. Happy to look into these things further for you guys offline. So I'll get back to both of you, and we will go from there. So little follow up. You have to undo your initial changes, I guess. Yes. So you have to like it's the way I see it right now is that once you adjust the projections, you're basically making what so by editing the projections, you're like disabling this feature because now what the builder is seeing isn't matching. So you can either use it like unedited only, but I don't know if that's like the way we want it to be. So I'll bring it up to the team and we'll see if that's like the only way that could be used or if we can do it a different way. But appreciate the question. I will find out the answer to both of those. I appreciate questions were really light coming into the stream. I was a little nervous that it would be a short one, but you guys did an awesome job of filling up the stream with questions. I will actually not be here tomorrow. Jordan will be doing a office hours for you. So I will get the answers to these questions and I will pass those along to Jordan to answer at the beginning of tomorrow's stream. And, comment here from John before we head out. Says it would be cool to edit projections and then have it use your projections to see the new 95th percent. So, I think like that feature that you're talking about is what is coming with the future update of being able to sort by lineup percentiles, that it won't just take their 95th percentile and then use that as their projection. That's like more like on a player level. The 95th percentile lineup sorting is going to grade the lineup as a whole by like the lineup's 95th percentile outcome, which is like a little different and a little more I would just say like better overall. But those are the things that are like coming down the line. So I'll find out the answer to those two questions, guys, and I'll get back to you. But appreciate everybody tuning in. Tune back in tomorrow to see Jordan hosting office hours. I will be back on Monday. And until then, good luck in all of your contests. The team is always around in support in Discord, ready to help out and answer any questions that you guys have. If you're new to SaberSim, there's a link below to a 7-day no strings attached free trial. I recommend trying this out. And until then, I will see you, everybody.